This is a recording from a workshop held in London on the 8th of April 2013 by HANDI, the Health Apps Network for Development and Innovation. The focus of the workshop was the NHS Interoperability Toolkit and how it can help health apps developers work effectively and play nicely with NHS data. In this presentation, Rob Dyke from Tactics 4 speaks about his experience working on a number of projects funded by the NHS ITK Challenge Fund. These have resulted in the creation of a number of open source components which are now freely available to other developers to use in their projects.
So yes, I'm Rob Dyke. I work for Tactics 4. I'm also, as Ian says, part of HANDI Health, one of the co-founders of that organisation. And since September, October time, well, October initially, when we won the various ITK Information Sharing Challenge Fund monies, we've been working on getting a number of products accredited to the ITK standards. Some of the company is still sane. Some of the company want to beat me with a stick because I suggested this was a really great idea and we should go for it. And some of the people who want to beat me are also in this room. So if you see anybody trying to attack me later on, I'd appreciate a bit of backup.
Which members of the company were sane before you started?
Quite. So I want to talk a little bit about the different projects that we've done, some of our experiences in that. And then talk about what we've created as a result of that. And I'm going to mix between being Rob Dyke as Tactics 4, because it was Tactics 4 that did the work, but also Rob Dyke as HANDI Health, where I've been involved in any number of conference calls with the Health and Social Care Information Centre about the DevNet for NHS developers, and in a lot of the sort of thinking that has gone into quite a lot of the work that I can see here now that George has done, and the team over the last couple of months, which kind of means that some of my frustrations, which I'm going to share, have already been addressed, but it's too late to change the presentation now. So I just want to talk about what these bundles were that we got involved in. So 4 projects. The first one that we did was with Luton and Dunstable to do wardware. So here we were implementing receiving admit, discharge and transfer messages from a trust integration engine made by InterSystems, which was already compliant, supposedly, and one of their other products to manage that, which is also compliant, supposedly. And I'll go on to why I'm emphasising how it was supposedly compliant as opposed to what the compliance actually gives you when you're trying to plug these things together. So that should have been quite simple, and in fact it was really quite simple. It was so simple looking at it that we thought we'd also work with some other people, particularly Doctor, on saying, well, we both need to receive ADT messages from trust integration engines, so we'll get together, we'll share our development resource, we'll make that ISAF award money go further by splitting out the development activities, we'll choose a common environment to develop in, and we'll get on and write some code. And that was pretty good, I think. Yeah, we had quite good fun. The ADT one was pretty good. We were just consuming some messages, had a few parts of the standard to implement, and we got that done. We also worked on a project with Kings to implement the CDA bundles, and this was a bit more complicated because instead of receiving a message, we were going to send a message, and here we had to be in a very different mode, and also implementing other parts of the document. So CDA. Rupert, I'm sorry, I don't actually know what that is. I keep forgetting what it is.
Technical document architecture.
That's right, something like that. Anyway, whereby with the CDA bundle, we knew that Black Pair were working with Moorfields Open Eyes, who are sitting at the back, hi Bill, to exchange CDA documents. And again, we figured that, well, why not try and make this money go a bit further, bring more people involved to the code base, and try and make a bigger bang, by pooling all our development resource there. So I think the only thing that we didn't do was actually do was to do ITK middleware. Given what we did do, and I'm not exactly looking forward to doing that at the moment. But I think the current things that have been put out on the developer net will make it certainly a little less challenging. I'll ask feedback from my developers when they've reviewed it as to whether or not they actually want to do it. But yes, this is what I think this is what was involved, and I think Perrin indicated there was an awful lot of reading the docs. And having seen the amount of information that George has been showing to us today, there is an awful lot of even clearer and much more accessible docs, but there's a lot of it to read there, and I can't stress enough how important it is to have someone on your team to completely immerse themselves in that. If you're going to go and do some ITK, really immerse yourselves in it. I think that immerse is perhaps too much of a gentle term. I mean, drown yourself in it would be probably a much better way of describing it. And certainly, if this is where even with that accessible platform which they put together with all the docs on now, if you're a very small team of 3 and 2 of you are doing the dev and another person is trying to keep the company going and try and get you sites and things like that, when you need to immerse yourself in all of that, you're not going to be doing anything else for what could be easily 6 or 12 weeks whilst you're doing this. So just bear that in mind. I think that's probably about a fair amount of fair review of what was going on with that. And if you think you have domain knowledge now about either your little bit of healthcare that you're working in because you've got an app for that, or you think you know about SOAP and REST and web services and how to do stuff using Java integration engines, you don't know nothing until you've drowned yourself in the docs. So there's an awful lot of work there in trying to bring yourself up to speed as a small team. There are people that can help with that. I mean, Perrin's mentioned how good the ITK team were in terms of helping people understand where they were failing on the accreditation. But I don't think anyone at the ITK team is able to just sit there and hold your hand as you go through and develop this stuff. So I'm really pleased to see what has come out on the developer network, because those code examples are much clearer than we ever had before. And the devil's in the detail, with the specifications here, and what you're implementing technically may well not match what is wanted from the business user, from the functional and the business aspects of it. You'll spend a lot of time working on those bits of spec, I think, just internally. I can show you any number of scribbled on whiteboards where we went over what our as is and what we were trying to replace with ITK and how that was working again, and everything that we put into our own wiki just as we iterated over that. So there's an awful lot of time in the spec, and then eventually you might get around to writing some code, which is fun. And once you've written it, you'll then push yourself up for accreditation. This iterative sort of submit your code, your examples, your outputs of the test harnesses work is a lot of work back and forth. I think it was, particularly in the most recent series of accreditations, the reason why it was an awful lot of work was because the ITK team had announced that there was a big pile of money and anybody that applied for it would essentially get it. So you had 50 or so projects, wasn't there, George, on the ISAF? 90 projects. That's an awful lot of projects to try and get accredited in what was practically 4 months, 5 months.
90 applied.
90 applied. Yeah.
It was 40 odd that
40 went through.
Yeah.
So even if you were doing practically one a day, that's not really how it worked, was it? It was an awful lot of work back and forth on that. So you guys were very busy, and there was an awful lot of back and forth between us as a team and the ITK team as to, okay, relax this, tighten up that, more evidence here. Please complete this spreadsheet again. So that's, I said ad infinitum there, but there's an awful lot of iteration on that. And then you'll get a certificate, and it's quite well, it's okay. I mean, Irene could have drawn something a bit nicer. I was expecting something with gold leaf foil on it. So the amount of work that you put in, I mean, it ought to have come on a satin cushion. But anyway, it's a nice PDF, and you can put it on your website, and people will see it. And then you might want to actually use it. And deploying it, getting your ITK code out there, and hoping that you can actually get it properly localized to meet however it's supposed to interface with the other supposedly compliant systems to get something like meaningful use was the term in the ITK Challenge Fund thing. You had to prove that not only had you got the accreditation, but the code was in, and you were successfully passing messages back and forth to deliver a patient benefit, the meaningful use. That's quite hard as well. The tinkering necessary in order to sort of resolve the kind of, I've got a standards compliant interface here, and you've got a standards compliant interface there. But why are we not passing any messages across this successfully? Is substantial. And if you need to put someone on site in a trust because you don't have remote access to N3 in order to edit your code, then as a small app developer, again, you've got then your developer is just out of the office for the time it takes to do that. I mean, thankfully for us, we had remote access through to N3, and we could do all of our tinkering whilst we were in the conference calls with the various people who were at their side and our side. But even then, there was a certain amount of I think across the board there was a certain amount of re-specification as to what actually constituted meaningful use, because it was very hard to get meaningful use for everybody in the time frame. So I'm trying to get this all off my chest because we worked really hard on this. Just a little bit stressed by it. But so how did we fare? This was drawn by Irene for me. Irene's my daughter, she's 7. Yeah, and I think this probably reflects everybody's ITK experiences. And by everybody, I mean perhaps the assessment team at CFH. We've put out something. It worked really well when we took a few companies through it in a very small scale way with an elastic bit of time around it. Does it work very well when you've got 90 people and 90 organisations applying to get down to 40 projects to try and get everybody done in 4.5 months? Yeah, that's. Well, at least the competency level is up now, which is really good on that. And I think that's probably the same for everybody that's been involved. We've done 4 projects, and that probably puts us in the same bracket as InterSystems, who are a massive global company who've got lots of accreditations for their ITK stuff. We're 6. And I really liked pointing that out to InterSystems when they were on the phone to us once. Have you ever done this before? Yeah, we've got 4. That's about as many as you've got, and ours are compliant. And I think that probably reflects how it works with us implementing it, when everybody tries to go for meaningful use. So here we've got the accreditation, we've got a hospital that's wanting to have these in, we've got a couple of system vendors to try and bring everything together, and we're all trying to work out, okay, let's get this implemented. It should just work because it's compliant, right? And then it doesn't, and then we go back and forth and have a little bit of a shit fight over whose standards are best implemented. But I think that certainly with all the stuff that you're putting out now in the DevNet, we might get a little more even fluctuation on that, but it's still a good investment of time necessary as a small app developer. Don't underestimate it. But when you've done it, nice little gold star certificate. Good fun. Why perhaps is it like this? Well, I think it's like this because there's an awful lot. There's some very different styles coming out. This is my Agile meets Waterfall slide. Yeah, I know. Interestingly, more people go across Niagara Falls successfully than fail, which is probably it's a really good reason to have this one. Although I can't recommend doing it in a steel barrel. I spent a lot of time on Wikipedia looking for this particular image. certainly if you're a small app developer, you're probably used to just enough code to do the job, lots of iteration, rip it out, put it back in again, this, that, and the other. That may not work very well when you're coming up against bigger organisations or bigger certainly when you're trying to do your iterative development against an accreditation process, which delivering the process in and of itself was a milestone for a more sort of traditional public sector Prince2 project, and you're probably delivering it as part of a wider set of Prince2 projects within an NHS organisation. So I think because of the different styles, that there are some challenges there in and of themselves. So just bear that in mind when you're going out to implement all of this stuff. And this is my favourite XKCD cartoon. I try and get it out in every single Handy Health event that I present at. But yeah. There are standards, and there are standards, and there are standards, and I think this is, my little. The reason why I've chosen this one is because when we came to implement the CDA bundle, the sending a CDA document to a well-known primary care systems vendor. We've got our accredited endpoint. They've got theirs. We know the spec, the non-coded CDA. We know what we're sending. And I send the document over to them, and it just fails. And I'm like, well, it shouldn't fail because it passed in the test harness only a day ago, and the document's compliant because we've just run it through a third-party document thing. And just now we were fighting over whose standard was more standard than others, and it turns out that although there is the standard for the non-coded CDA with exactly what's supposed to be in there as a template, when you then localize it, as was one of my points on an earlier slide, you find that there's lots of little nuances around what is now mandatory, what must things are being added to the standard when you come to localize it. And so again, finding out all of that as soon as possible is really helpful. Otherwise you can go a bit mad. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the open ITK solutions that are out there available. Specifically here I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've done, but also point you to a few other resources that if you want to write down the URLs now in your scrawled handwriting you can do, but all of this will be up on the Handy Health website shortly. So recently some of the people from CFH ran a webinar talking about CDA resources. So this gave you some example places where you could go to get the templating engines to build CDAs, APIs for testing the validity of the content you've created and things like that. And there's a whole CDA network on networks.nhs.uk and lots of resources there, which I can thoroughly recommend you have a read of if you're interested in clinical documents. There's a bunch of projects up on the eHealth open source Forge, which is hosted by Tactics4, including a few bits from Michael at XML Solutions, but also a few from the CFH themselves around doing just the XML validation and necessary as the envelope for your various content that you want to send across. So I thoroughly recommend you having a look there as well. All the code that we wrote, both for the ADT at Luton receiving and also all the CDA sending that we've done with Black Pear and with Kings, all of that is going up on the Forge as well. We're just doing a little bit of a clear up of all the expletives that we wrote in, where we put things like fugly hack in order to make sure this mad new requirement from the ITK assessment team has been implemented. So we're just trying to make sure all of that comes out before we put it in. That'll be available to download. And I think what we're trying to sort of demonstrate by doing that is that we're sort of creating the opportunity for people, other developers, other organisations to take a good chunk of working code and add to it. So we've done non-coded CDA, but maybe you need to be able to do a particular discharge summary CDA. Well, template that out, make it work in this, and for the 20% of the work that you do on getting your template right, you can at least take the 80% of all the transport, all the core, the SSL features, and everything else that you need. So if you want to get involved in that a bit more, either talk to myself or Eckhart Schwartz, who's here as well from Tactics4 today. and we'll keep you up to date as to when that gets released. But we'll also be releasing it via the Handy Health channels as well. But what is it? So it's using Apache Service Mix, so lots of Java to do most of the heavy lifting, which is why we're really pleased to see that there's lots of Java bits coming out of the developer network, because we'll do a judicious copy and paste of all of that code and see if we can make our reference implementation talk to their reference implementation. That would be quite a good test, I think, see if it works, and to the benefit of us both and to the community of developers writ large, I think, if we can make that work. It'll be under open source licenses, so if you use it, contribute back to it. If you fix it, if you have patches, add to it. That'd be really great. But as I say, it's core plus bundle model, so very easy for you to plug in your different routes and containers into that in order to make it work. One small slide on the sales pitch, and then we'll have conversations. So one of the things that Tactics 4 are trying to do as well through Handy Health is to do ITK as a service. We've got an N3 connected data center. We can host an instance of our ITK resources for you. So in the example of Black Pair sending documents to Open Eyes, we host their application, we generate we help them with the generation of the CDAs, and then we send that over N3 to the NHS organisation and they receive it. We also know ITK knowledgeable developers and consultants. Some of them are in this room. Michael and Nick have been pointed at already, and there's some other people who we can put in touch with as well. Not just ourselves, but other people who really know how this works, because they've been at the coalface for a lot longer than we have. Thank you very much.